Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my channel. Today we're going to start this video by taking a look at this photo that I'm showing on the screen. And as you look at it, at first glance, you can see we have world number 1 Magnus Carlsen sitting on the sofa, and then you take a look at the other people's faces and you can see we have Fabiano Caruana, Hikaru Nakamura, Gukesh Damaraju, and Arjun Eragaizi. And if you don't know, but actually these 5 players are the world's top 5 chess players ranked by their FIDE ratings. So Magnus is world number 1, Hikaru is 2nd, and we have Gukesh in 3rd, Arjun 4th, and Fabiano in 5th. So this is the most recent ranking of these players, and they're gathered together right now in this room in front of this chessboard, and they all seem like they are very serious about it. And well, even though Hikaru looks like he is smiling, but they are definitely discussing about something. And as you look closer at this chessboard, you can see that we have the first 2 moves, f4, f5. Now this is definitely something that doesn't happen in standard chess, especially at the highest level of chess. So as you look closely, you can see that these pieces, especially as you can see at first glance, this knight is placed on a1 instead of on b1 where it should be, and this is definitely not standard chess. Then if you're following the chess world very closely, you should know that recently there is the Paris Freestyle Chess Grand Slam ongoing. And these 5 players, they are discussing about what openings should they play in this very specific position in the Fischer random chess, because the pieces are all placed on different squares compared to standard chess. So definitely you need to discuss about how to start the game in a very positive way. All right, so we're done discussing about this photo, and now let's jump into the action. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Freestyle Chess Grand Slam Tour held in Paris. And actually, the time I'm recording this video, it has already reached the finals, the grand final of this whole tournament. But unfortunately, before this, I have been participating in a tournament recently, and I didn't have time to record game recaps of the quarterfinals, the round robin, the semifinals. But today, I'm just in time to do a recap of the finals which have just started. So in the finals, we have Magnus Carlsen and Hikaru Nakamura facing off against each other. And before we jump into that game, I'm going to quickly introduce this tournament to you guys, some of the basic details. So the Freestyle Chess Paris Grand Slam is the second of 5 events of the multi-million-dollar Freestyle Chess Grand Slam Tour. Each Grand Slam event features 10 participants, the top 3 of the previous Grand Slam, the top 3 by classical rating, 2 organizer wildcards, the winner of a major classical tournament, and the winner of Chess.com's play-ins. So here, as you can see, these are the players that are participating in this tournament, and the schedule, of course, is, we have the play-ins, but when it really happens in Paris, it is April 7th to 14th. And yeah, 8 players compete to determine the winner of the event, because after the round robin, some players will be eliminated, and then there will be 8 players left. We first of all single elimination knockout, 2 game matches, time control 90 minutes plus 30 seconds each move. So it's a pretty long time control. And here we have the Grand Slam prize money, which, as you can see, first place we have a $200,000 prize. So everyone is definitely fighting their best for this huge prize fund. And here, these are some of the not so important details. But now I think you should have already know a little bit about this tournament. And now let's jump into this game. This is a news that has been written by by Chess.com, and if you guys are interested, you can go and take a look at it. And here, let's jump into the action, where Magnus is playing with the white pieces versus Hikaru. This is the first classical game of the finals between these two players, and this is the first classical game. So let's jump straight into it. First of all, as we can see, the pieces on the back rank are placed very strangely, but this is Fischer random chess. So besides, like both sides have two bishops with like opposite color, and the king should be between the two rooks. Anything else is just very random. All right, so Magnus is with the white pieces, and he starts with the move c4, c5, and here we have the move knight c3, developing the knight c6, and here knight f3, e5. So Hikaru is already pushing his pawns in the center to gain some space. And here we have the move b4. Now actually b4 is a very interesting move here because sacrificing a pawn immediately in the opening. Actually, it will be much more positional or like standard if white goes for something like d3 to gain some control of the center squares. This will be something more calm, but actually in the game, Magnus decides to go for some counterplay immediately by pushing the pawn b4. And here, Hikaru decides to take knight takes b4, but of course, Magnus is in time to win the pawn back and takes the pawn on e5. Now, if black takes with the c pawn, c takes b4, then actually for white can go knight d5. First of all, this knight is putting pressure on the b4 pawn, but also this knight and the queen are both targeting the e5 pawn, so white has enough compensation. And in the game, that is why Hikaru decides to take on b4 with the knight, which is the best reply here, and we have knight takes e5. In the game, we have g6, opening up the diagonal of this bishop and putting some pressure on these two knights as well as the queen. In the game, we have the move d4. Magnus is just straight up like opening up everything in the center, and this definitely shows that in this very first classical game in the final, he is not going for an easy draw, but he is going to play on for lots of counterplay and a very aggressive moves. So in the game, Hikaru decides to go short castle immediately. And if you are curious about how castling works in Fischer Random, well, basically, first of all, there should be no pieces blockading like the route of the rook and the king castling. Second of all, there should be like, for example, let's say if there's a bishop on d6, you cannot castle your king because it will run into the diagonal. But basically right now, it's completely fine for black to castle, and Hikaru goes short castle. This is already very similar to random, like standard chess, because already one of the sides has got his king to safety. And now let's see what Magnus does. He played knight g4. So trying to go for these weakened dark squares in black's territory, and here Hikaru decides to go bishop g7 to defend. But actually here, it is completely fine for him to ignore knight h6, and he can simply take this d4 pawn. But what he might be afraid of is that white now actually has this rook takes d4 move, and after takes, knight d5 here, white, even though has sacrificed half a piece, a rook for the bishop, but definitely white has a lot of counterplay here, and black's king is kind of weak. So white has compensation for the lost material. And that is probably why in the game Hikaru, after thinking for a couple of minutes, decides to go for this more reasonable bishop g7 move. And in the game we have d takes c5. But actually, what white can do here to gain more advantage is that white can go for this bishop h6 move to offer a trade of bishops. And here it is best for black to ignore it and just start pushing the pawns further, like f5, and after takes, take back with the knight, and here after knight h6, king h8, the king is right now safe in the corner, and this knight blockades this diagonal. So black is doing pretty much fine here. But also, white might have more counterplay after d takes c5, playing this way, but both sides definitely have their own chances. But bishop h6 is definitely better than taking on c5 immediately, which was played in the game by Magnus. D takes c5, and here we have d5. So Hikaru found the best move here in the game. Actually, the best two moves here are either to go d5 or d6. but both of these moves ideas are trying to open up the center and also opening up the diagonal of this bishop. So in the game we have d5, and here the knight needs to move, and we have knight h6. King h8, of course, and here we have g4, pushing the pawn further. And as you can see, Magnus, he is not castling his king whatsoever, but straight up launching a huge attack on the king side. And it's also clear that already Hikaru has castled his king, so there's no other castling towards the queen side options, and his king is somehow just will be staying on the king side forever. Right now, white is slightly better, but Hikaru, of course, is playing really well as well. He played bishop e6, developing his bishop. C takes d5, knight takes d5. We have a couple of exchanges, bishop d5 here, and Magnus found the best move in this position. He played bishop b2, a brilliant reply. Of course, you cannot take on d5 right now because the bishop is pinning this knight and the queen, and simply white needs to do something in order to trying to threaten to take on d5, but also at the same time trying to break this pin, very annoying pin. And Magnus found the only move here, which is to go bishop b2, not only threatening to take on d5 on the very next move, but also putting a lot of pressure on this diagonal. This knight can now move for free, don't need to worry about any bishop taking the queen ideas. So this is a really nice option from Magnus. In the game we have bishop e6 back. Hikaru is also defending pretty well, and in the game we have g5. So Magnus is pushing his pawns further and creating a ton of space on the king side. In the game we have rook takes d1, and here we have queen takes d1. But actually it is best to take with the knight, because now this diagonal is opened up and there's a lot of pressure on this g7 bishop. Obviously you cannot take on b2, because actually it's both fine, either take with the knight or with the queen. Let's say you take with the knight, and here after knight g7 or something, knight goes to d3, white will have a lot of counterplay towards black's king. But in the game, queen takes d1 was played, which is a move that seems seems more reasonable, logical. Queen takes d1, and in the game we have queen c8. So Hikaru is getting out his queen and also threatening to take this c5 pawn. But in the game, Magnus just simply ignores all of these taking the pawns ideas or threats, and he went for this really clear and nice idea by playing rook g3. The rook is now on the third rank, even though white has already given up his chances to castle his king. But not only does this rook is able to go to h3 at some point if this bishop is not controlling h3, but also this rook is protecting the c3 knight. And this rook, can go to a lot of places. It can even double on the d file or go to f file to attack the f7 pawn. So rook g3 is a very nice idea, but this is a move that needs a lot of deep calculation, and this definitely shows how strong Magnus' calculation is, and he has a very clear idea. Well, in the game, Hikaru decides to go for queen takes c5, taking the pawn anyways, but right now this rook is defending this knight, so white doesn't need to worry about it. And in the game, knight e4 was played. So this is definitely white's follow-up idea, attacking the queen and also threatening this bishop. In the game, we have queen d5, offering a queen trade, but here Magnus simply takes it, and after bishop takes d5, played knight f6. And as you can see right now, material is even. The pawns are even, but it's pretty unbalanced. The pawn structure, also the activeness of the pieces are pretty much unbalanced. As you can see, white's pieces are just how to describe them. They're at the best places that they can ever imagine. These two knights are defended by this only g5 pawn, but they're creating a ton of pressure on black's pieces and the pawns, and this pawn is defended by its own rook. And also not only that, but this rook is now on g3 and it's free to swing over towards any of the squares on the third rank. So white is slightly better here because white's pieces are much more active than black's pieces are, and also white has a lot of space advantage on the king side. So definitely it is much more comfortable for white to play in this position. But of course, if black defends extremely accurate, it is still completely fine for black. In the game, however, Hikaru immediately made a mistake by playing bishop takes a2. What he should have played instead is actually to take this f6 knight, and after bishop takes f6, to play rook b8, to swing this rook out and push the pawns further up the board, because Black's advantage is on the queen side, because he has 2 pawns and White only has 1 pawn. So it's possible for Black to push the pawns further and create a passed pawn. And this is Black's main idea. But in the game, this is not easy to see, and Hikaru instead took the pawn on a2 immediately. But after rook a3, Magnus is now forking the bishop and the pawn and threatening to take this pawn back, bishop e6 back, and here we have rook takes a7. Not only this, White is now winning back the pawn, but also Magnus is threatening directly to take this b7 pawn on the very next move. And it's not that easy for Black to defend because Black's pieces are still cramped on the king side and kind of passive. In the game, Hikaru decides to go knight d6, finally developing his pieces and defending the b7 pawn. But here, Magnus calmly played this move f3. And here we have rook c8, activating the rook, bishop e5. This is a small inaccuracy. It's better for White to follow his plan and push e4 and to create more space and threaten e5 ideas. But probably what Magnus is worrying about is that it might give Black some chances with rook c2 to create some counterplay, even though after bishop e5, White is still completely fine and close to winning. But of course, e4 is a move that needs a lot of calculation, and in the game, Magnus decides to go for this bishop e5 move immediately, which is also still pretty much good enough for White. And in the game, Hikaru found this really nice defending move, knight f5. But still, he is under more pressure than White is after knight takes f5. Here, the only way for Black to try to stay closer to equalization is to take with a g-pawn. Because you're taking with the g-pawn now that the bishop is defending these 2 pawns, and it's not that easy for White to break through. But now you just compare. If you take with the bishop, as played in the game, which seems more logical because you don't need to damage your own pawn structure, but then after rook takes b7, White is taking this pawn but also straight up attacking the f7 pawn, gaining another tempo, and in the game the bishop has to go back. But here, after rook b4, the rook drops back and threatens to go rook h4 to threaten checkmate on h7. So Black needs to be careful right now, and also worth noting is that Black is down a full pawn. In the game, Hikaru took the knight on f6 because he needs to, or else he'll just allow rook h4, rook h7. Bishop takes f6, and here king g8 forced, king f2, rook c5, even though this is opposite colored bishop endgame, but Black's pieces, the king and the bishop, also these pawn structure are just way too badly placed, and also Black is down a pawn, and it's just not enough for Black to save the position. In the game, Magnus played extremely well, and he played king g3, h6, trying to damage White's pawn structure, but simply Magnus just takes on h6, and after king h7, here simply Magnus just defends the h6 pawn, and right now White is up 2 pawns, and it's just way too much and completely winning for White. g5, pushing the pawn further, but it doesn't really help. e4, well, not the most accurate way to finish off this game. It's better for White to play something like rook b6, and then, rook b6, let's say, Black, for example, goes rook c2, now that you go e4. Because the difference is that if you go e4 immediately, there's f5. And, if you go rook b6 first, and then rook c2, e4, there's no longer f5 because this bishop is hanging. So this is the main difference. But in the game, this is a very slightly, significant difference, and Magnus, he played e4 immediately, but it's not a big difference right now. f5, Hikaru is trying his best, but after rook b7, f4 check, actually, he is already able to hold this position. King f2, rook c2, king e1, and at this point, Hikaru is able to hold a draw by taking on h2. This is a draw. And after bishop f8, you can just simply go back, and this rook is right now able to trail down this pawn. It will be impossible for White to push this pawn further, and it's suddenly a very easy draw for black. But then, with only 4 minutes left on the clock, Hikaru just simply didn't see this idea and he played bishop a2. He thought that it was just fine for him to wait back and forth, but didn't realize that after bishop f8 check, he simply resigned here because it's unstoppable. Like king g8, there's h7, king h8, bishop d6 ideas are coming, bishop e5 is suddenly unstoppable. And here, if you go king h8, well, there's no big difference. Here, for white can go for something like h4 even. And if you want to finish it off faster, you can even go for something like bishop e7 to take these pawns. And again, it's game over. As you can see, Hikaru is defending really well, and here he only needs to play this rook h2 move in order to finish off this game with a very happy ending in a draw. But unfortunately, under time pressure, he played bishop a2, and after bishop f8, he resigned because suddenly it's unstoppable. The h7 pawn, the h6 pawn will just push h7, h8 queen. White is completely winning. So Magnus won this first game of the grand final round 1 classical game, and right now, the time I'm recording this video, round 2 of the classical, well, game 2 of the classical final is happening right now. Hikaru is with the white pieces, Magnus with the black pieces. Hikaru is in a must-win situation, and Magnus only needs a draw. If Hikaru wins, then these two players will go into the tie breaks, and definitely there will be much more interesting chess to watch. But right now, hope you guys enjoyed this game, and hope you guys enjoyed this recap of this game, and as well as this video. Thank you for watching, please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!